just on a vocational level. So I think, again, it's the very openness about open educational resources that provides a whole range of different opportunities for a whole range of different people. That's all for me.
And a really useful summary again, some quite important key points there, and kind of distinct from some of the other points that have been made. That's fantastic. I'm just going to pause at this moment to see if any of the project team members, I think I've done everybody else in the group, but I'm just going to pause, and if you'd like to, from the project team, to add some reflections or some additional thoughts, if you could put your hand up and I'll pass the mic over to you. Okay, I'll take that as a no then. So what I suggest we do is we go around again and look at the second question. So what do you think are the key challenges to achieving the vision behind the kind of things we've just been talking about? And I'll take it in order in the list. So Andy, if I could start with you first, please.
Okay, thank you, Grania. I think the challenges come in different forms, and obviously since I talked about there being many different types of users or potential users of open educational resources, I think that the biggest ones to overcome in this are the nature of the practice where you are beginning to use and reuse people's material in hopefully an acknowledged way, which is done and seem to be done in a legitimate way and not illegally in any way, which sort of goes against some of the other countervailing trends there are in terms of copyright protection, issues in terms of illegal downloading of say music or other things. So the whole, we've been brought up in a culture of there being copyright and there being this intellectual property and needing to respect that, and equally that we should not get involved in plagiarism. In a sense, open educational resources, whoever they use, and that involves acknowledged plagiarism, which is in a sense okay, because as long as you attribute where you take other people's material for, reuse other people's material, and you're doing it because they have obviously put an appropriate open license on it, then it's a valid practice. But this whole practice, whether it is for a professor or a lecturer or a high school teacher or it's somebody else out there, is often a very different cultural one to get across. And obviously there are different cultures and values placed upon these different issues in different countries. But so overcoming this sort of countervailing trend that everything there is, got to be copyrighted and you mustn't reuse people's material, mustn't do things illegally, there's just this great cultural barrier to opening up and doing things in a way which people don't feel or might feel they're very uncomfortable about doing in normal circumstances.
Thanks, Andy. That's really helpful. David, what are your thoughts on this question?
I think I would amplify what Andy has said, really. It is cultural. It's all cultural. There are very few technical issues. There's not really very many legal issues. Now that institutions are starting to sort out their own position on the ownership of content which is developed by staff or students at their institution for the first citizen work. It is just changing the academic culture. Something that one of the UK OER2 projects mentioned to me recently is that we spend a lot of time praising people for releasing OER, and I think we've reached a stage where that's now fundamentally seen as a good thing. But we tend not to praise people that actually use OER in teaching. It tends to be looked upon oddly, gives the impression that they're not doing as much work as people that are creating materials from scratch. There's been anecdotes about students complaining because they're seeing the logo of a different university on the materials, stuff like that. So I think that is the primary challenge pretty much. It's changing that culture of reuse and continuing to change the culture so relief becomes more and more accepted.
It's really key, I think, changing that culture of reuse is a real major issue. That's great. Hans, can I hand over to you now, please?
Yes, I agree with what was said previously. I think the culture of reuse should be improved. And our experience in the MIL project is that primary and secondary school teachers, they don't have problem with sharing their resources. But we have noticed a big problem that they are afraid to edit and improve resources that have been shared by other teachers. So for us, the challenge is how we can introduce this culture of online collaboration to teachers so that they will truly start improving other teachers' resources.
And some very useful points there again. And I think there's also the tension between a focus on teaching and a focus on research in research-intensive universities. Teaching is always, sadly, the poor sister, I think. Patrick, what are your thoughts on this?
Yes, I can see this sort of cultural element coming through, but I think in some ways it can be a bit simpler. The problem in that is that it's nobody's job to do this. It's we've got a structure for creating materials, we've got a structure for teaching people, but there's nobody's job to actually take material and reuse it, and I think so that hits on that particular element. But this is only addressing one part of the vision, because there's also a vision around really opening up the educational system, opening up the opportunities for learning that don't so much depend on the reuse within institutions. It's more people grabbing hold of what can be used out there and building it up into representations for own learning. And there I think we are perhaps waiting for exactly the right model to come along, sort of the model that is combines social learning with the freedom, with gathering together the things you do day to day. Because I think that lifelong learning models that we've looked at in the past have tended to build on the education system more, whereas I think the non-formal side that Peter was talking about can be changed more radically around open resources and open ways in which people can show their reputation. So I think there's a big challenge there about exactly what we mean by what I'm saying, what do I mean, I'm not entirely sure. And actually there is some remaining then technical, I suppose, challenges there that are about somebody building the right system. And it might be a system that gets built outside of the conventional education areas. So I think it depends which part of the vision. There's a vision that relates to the improvement of university educational processes and school processes, and there's also a vision where something changes in the way people learn. And so I think there's a cultural issue that we can do something about tackling. There's also trying to get the right trigger point for some of the bigger visions.
Really nice summary and some really key points to consider there. Peter, over to you.
Yes, thank you. I've got a couple of points. Also, I agree with anything, all that was said before. I think cultural issues are a very important one. And there is one that I would want to highlight, which is I should preface that by saying that we're involved as OU in a project to provide open educational resources for secondary education. The project is called Wikiwijs, Wikiwijs in Dutch. And the idea is that with that project, the dominance of the educational publishers can somehow be broken. But of course, it will be very difficult to do that because the vested interests are so large. So there is a, if you like, cultural issue, because I understand from Hans that issue does not apply to Estonia, for instance. A second one is a psychological issue, which is that you need to involve or you need to incite people to collaborate with each other. And I think in the beginning, of the learning objects movement and so on, we felt that people would do that because they could see the benefits of that. But I think those benefits are in the distance, time-wise, and also they may be benefits that accrue to others, not to themselves. So I think if you are serious about developing open educational resources and serious about people collaborating, doing that, we need business models, if you like, or collaboration models that make clear what is in it for the people who are participating in that. And of course, that relates to things like increasing quality, for instance. That could be a driver. And freeing up time to do other things could also be a driver. But if you develop a system in which you develop those kinds of resources, then that system should make sure that the benefits are visible or transparent to the people who participate. And then, and I think I disagree here with, I think it was David who said there are no legal and financial issues. It depends. And this is something I hinted at already in my introduction. At the OU, we're intent on making all our course materials without the, let's say, the pedagogical shell around it, available as open educational resources. And it turns out that we run into a legal problem because of the way we are financed. I'm not going to delve too deeply into that, but the interesting thing is that we run into a conflict between the Ministries of Education and the Ministry of Economic Affairs. The Ministry of Education people feel that if we make our resources available also, for instance, for independent and lifelong learning and so on, that they should not pay for that. That should be the Ministry of Economic Affairs, who is in charge of professional development and things like that. So interestingly, these kinds of issues crop up. One should try to challenge or to change the model on which we have been operating so far. And I'm sure other issues like this will start cropping up as well. And this is it, I think, for the moment.
There a nice bit of disagreement amongst participants. Excellent. Susan, what are your thoughts?
Clearly, I agree about all the comments with respect to changing the culture. I think that the academic culture obviously doesn't make this easy, but people do need new skills, and if they're going to learn to collaborate, and if they're going to learn to share others' materials and use them, there needs to be some institutional support for this. The other issue that I find quite interesting is that of the learner. There too, learners need to acquire new skills in a sort of an academic digital literacy, if you will, that allows them to engage with material